Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more. Mm, 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 mm. Well, good morning and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. It is Thinking Thursday, and we are back in a very appropriate for this time and season book, Failures of Forgiveness by Dr. Maisha Cherry. What we get wrong and how to do better. In light of the two state executions that have gone down of innocent men, we could start there. We could start with the fact that neither one of those families should be pressured into quote unquote forgiving people who chose to do the unjust thing by executing their family member. Now, you know that there are going to be some people who might want to interview those family members and they might want to say, well, can you ever find it in your heart to forgive? That's not the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking is, why are they continuing to ignore evidence, to ignore even calls for, commuting that sentence to a life sentence? Why are they ignoring the facts? And why are they going ahead and executing men who have been proven by DNA evidence to have not actually done these crimes? And someone made a very good point. They said, follow the money. If they would have let either one of those men off, and from my understanding, there's yet another case coming up. If they let either one of those men off, those men would have turned around and sued the state, and they would be paying their descendants into perpetuity. So it was easier to go ahead with the execution than it was to take an L and say, hey, we prosecuted the wrong person. The evidence has proven that they are not guilty. Let's offer exoneration and let's do the right thing and release them. Rather than do that, they chose the other route. So, we've been talking about forgiveness, and we are in the chapter Making a Good Ask. And she's talking about this third part, that if you're going to ask for forgiveness, called pleading. Pleading. Now, as we continue to read, so we are kind of jumping right into the middle of this pleading section here. She is talking about who is supposed to be bringing anything to the victim. Okay, so let us begin. The requester does not bring anything to the victim but the request itself, and the requester is likely to expect that the victim will give him an offering of forgiveness. In such cases, an invitation to forgive may aim for a superficial repair, a kind of repair that does not address wrongdoing, healing for the victim, or restoration of relationships. Rather, it only provides the appearance of repair or temporary repair. By offering such an invitation, wrongdoers may be seeking cognitive and emotional relief strictly for themselves rather than for the victim. And that's kind of where we left off last time, is that sometimes wrongdoers are just trying to seek mental relief for themselves. They're not necessarily trying to do any kind of repair. They're not necessarily trying to make sure that that victim goes through a process of healing. They just want mental reprieve for themselves. While I have no objection to talking about forgiveness with victims, I do have an objection to overburdening victims. So much is taken from them through the wrongdoing. Requesting that victims continue to give as we remain empty handed can overburden them in distinct ways. Out of respect, we should give them apologies, denunciations of wrongdoing, or reparations. What they decide to give us in return is their prerogative. Inviting victims to forgive us or to give us forgiveness when we give them nothing in return is to impose an additional burden. To be sure, even when all necessary conditions are met, an invitation to forgive may still burden the victim. When convicted murderer Matthew Poncelet says, "I ask your forgiveness for what I done," the parents may have found this quite burdensome. However, because he acknowledged that what he did was wrong, revealed his change in character, and didn't wait for the family members to respond, his invitation was likely to burden them less than would an invitation with any unmet conditions. Invitations to forgive are also inappropriate when they operate as moral tests, as ways of examining a victim's moral and political commitments. In certain social contexts, an invitation to forgive can be an unfair way to assess whether a person is really religious, committed to the cause, or a moral person. Not only is this a bad way to take a person's measure, it is insincere and patronizing. I've often witnessed such moral tests in public religious settings. A cheating husband, for example, would confess his failures in front of the congregation and then publicly ask his wife to forgive him. I always wondered why this was being done in public rather than in private. But I eventually realized that the public dimension made for a perfect examination room. In that moment, the wife would not only feel on the spot, but she would also feel tested. For that was the whole point of the moment. If she did not forgive, witnessing church members were likely to judge her as not a Christian, because the Bible commands that we forgive others. Moreover, they were likely to consider her a bad wife and even blame her for the infidelity because their gender and religious norms dictate that a wife stick by their man no matter what. I discovered that the worry of failing the moral test in the eyes of a community one cares about and reaping the consequences that would ensue often informed her and others' "I forgive you" responses. As you can see, a test examiner needn't be the person extending the invitation. It can be witnesses to the invitation. What these moral examinations require are those in a position to judge and social norms from which to make the judgment. I have no doubt that the husband extended the invite in this context to reap results that would fall in his favor. Invitations as moral tests are ways to get reparative results through manipulative and inconsiderate means. So if you're putting people on the spot in public, demanding that they forgive you for something, and you haven't had a private conversation with them, you haven't admitted to them, what you've done wrong, you haven't had a conversation with them about how you plan to repair your relationship, it's at the least manipulative. Unfortunately, invitations to forgive can have the effect of a test even when this is not our intention, particularly when they are presented to victims who are often made to prove their morality. Take, for instance, Black men in the United States. Many people often stereotypically perceive Black men as threatening and criminal. Now, getting on the internet and being on people's live streams saying inappropriate things does not help this stereotype. Let me just say that. We might extend an invitation to forgive a black man in ways that make him feel that he must prove how kind or how nonviolent he is through forgiveness, even if the same invitation to a white man would have no such effect. Similarly, many people in the West tend to think that women should exhibit feminine or ladylike virtues such as compassion, empathy, and forgiveness, particularly to men. We might extend to a woman an invitation to forgive in ways that make her feel that she must prove how much of a lady she is by acquiescing to this request. So, here are some suggestions as we move into how do you add an apology to the mix when you're asking for forgiveness. Suggestion: politely invite someone to forgive, but make sure that you have given them the reasons first and that you are asking for the right reason. Don't extend the invitation too quickly. Timing is everything. Consider your offense and what you've done before inviting someone to forgive you. Now, adding apologies to the mix. If your brain hurts from the work it is doing in rethinking forgiveness, it's going to go into overdrive when it discovers that apologies are not without their problems as well. It is easy to understand how begging for forgiveness can inappropriately pressure victims. Perhaps more surprising is my view that one can place even more pressure on a victim by apologizing before extending an invitation to forgive. The apology may make the victim feel that they must say yes to the request, even if they are not yet ready to forgive you. Even though apologies condemn wrongdoing and we can offer them without intentions of grandstanding, they are also vice nested in virtue because they can function to cut off any further criticisms of the wrongdoer, i.e., well, we know it was bad, but at least he apologized or she apologized. Imagine hearing someone say, I know I messed up, but I apologize, as if their apology wipes away any need to continue to condemn their actions or any need for repair. In different contexts, we can use apology as well as reinforce power. A rough apology may communicate a relinquishing of power, while a slow and loud apology can reinforce power. Apologies can press you for a response. We can also use them to assert a particular narrative rather than accurately characterize what happened to whom it happened. Has anybody ever given you an apology that made it appear as if it was your fault? Put a hand up in the comment section. If somebody said, I apologize for, and then they proceed to reframe what it was that they did as if it was your fault. Is that a true apology? No, it's a shifting of the narrative. It's asserting a narrative and it's characterizing or trying to sometimes lessen what they did as if it was not truly harmful to you. The apology can take center stage, overshadowing and obscuring the wrongdoing that prompted it. One recent example of this involves a Hollywood actor. In 2017, actor Anthony Rapp, in an interview with BuzzFeed, accused actor Kevin Spacey of making a sexual advance at him when he was just 14 years old. Spacey was 26 at the time. In response, Spacey issued the following apology. I honestly do not remember the encounter, but if I did behave then as he describes, I owe him the sincerest apology for what would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior. Note how he claims to not have remembered the incident, but then blames the incident on alcohol. He then goes on to obscure and gain power through it by using the apology to come out as a gay man. I remember that moment distinctly. This story has encouraged me to address other things about my life. I have had relationships with both men and women. I have loved and had romantic encounters with men throughout my life, and I choose now to live as a gay man, Spacey says. The apology no longer concerns inappropriate behavior now committed against a teenage boy. The narrative that is now given is about an actor who has had to hide his sexuality throughout his career, but has decided now to be brave and hide no longer. It's completely shifted away from the accusation, and the power is in the hands of Spacey at that point. When we use apologies in this way, it's hard to interpret them as sincere and forgive as a result. More men would follow Rapp in accusing Spacey of this kind of harassment and misconduct. Spacey would go on to face several counts of assault in the UK, stemming from incidences that allegedly occurred between 2005 and 2013. At the time of this writing, he is facing 7 additional charges that allegedly occurred between 2001 and 2004 in the UK. Now, let's see, at the time of her writing, this was 2023. I think 2024, I think he has beat all those charges, I think, up until at this point. Social positions such as gender and race also impact apologies. For example, women, because of gendered expectations, face pressure to accept apologies, particularly from men. Social positions also impact what harms we apologize for. While a government official may apologize for his staff's unethical behavior, the responsibility taken is often narrow, and those in power rarely make apologies for systematic practices. All of this does not take away from the importance of a good apology. However, we should remain alert to the fact that not all apologies are created equal. Some apologies are worse than others, and indeed worse than not apologizing at all. To prevent pressure that results when we combine invitations with apologies, the philosopher Zenon Zablonsky suggests that pleas must be preceded by an apology, an acknowledgement of the difficulty of granting forgiveness, an acknowledgement of the possibility that the offended party may not yet be able to forgive. Without the second and third steps, adding an apology to an invitation to forgive may not always lessen the insensitivity and the inappropriate pressure put on the person. Although these 3 conditions will give us the things that I've said we should give to victims, I have a better idea. We can meet conditions 2 and 3 by expressing a hope of forgiveness rather than offering an invitation to forgive. In expressing a hope, we articulate a desire for a forgiveness that is not possible yet not certain either. Unlike an invitation or other requests, expressing hope does not ask anything of the victim. Instead, it expresses a desire but doesn't request that the victim fulfill it. Instead of inviting a victim to forgive, we simply say, I hope you can forgive me. If predictive inquiries can open up dialogue and provide an opportunity for the victim to present his or her conditions to us, then we might assume that invitations can do the same. If a wrongdoer extends an invitation to forgive, the victim could respond by stating they would need to first see a few things before they can forgive. I do not doubt that this can occur. However, because of the risks that come along with offering an invitation, it is best to consider expressing a hope for forgiveness instead. So, what's the suggestion here? Remember that apologies can reveal moral insight into the wrongdoer and validate a victim's emotions, but they can also obscure wrongdoing and place undue pressure on the victim. Don't think apologies make everything all right, and get in the habit of expressing a hope for someone's forgiveness rather than asking for it. A refresher and a warning as we close this chapter. It may be difficult at times to keep track of what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, harmful and helpful to ask of victims, given all of these distinctions. With that in mind, I summarize the takeaways that can serve as a guide. It's a reminder of the options we have when it comes to asking for or about someone's forgiveness. It's also a reminder that not everyone has the standing to ask, that the context in which we make requests of people matter, and that we may need to meet certain conditions before we make our requests. I'm going to hold this up here so you can see the chart. I'm not sure if it's going to show backwards or not, but I'll just let you see. She's sort of got a chart set up here in the book to help you think about when you should be making the ask or how you should be making it. And again, I encourage you to actually get the book itself so that you can take a look at that chart better, which is on page 63. Finally, we should not take our role as requesters lightly. Questions can garner information, but they can also offend. Forgiveness requests can engage victims, but can also deny them agency. Our queries can center forgivers and withholders, but also cover up wrongdoing. Although it is morally appropriate for us to make some requests, this doesn't mean that everything will go perfect when we do. As we shall see in chapter 4 and 5, this is particularly so when we ask for and about the forgiveness of others in public and when race is at the forefront. So, next time we come back to this book, she is going to talk about forgiveness as a political project, and she's going to be looking at South Africa and what happened in South Africa and how they worked together and had a commission. She's going to talk about that commission on what happened in South Africa and whether these people were given a true choice and path through to forgiveness. All right. This was my reading for today. Failures of Forgiveness, What We Get Wrong and How to Do Better. I recommend this book particularly for the African American community because many times we are tasked with forgiving people. And many times we are seen as one of the most forgiving groups of people overall. But so that that forgiveness part of us is not taken advantage of, I highly recommend that you get this book and read up on what it actually means to forgive. Make sure you're not forgiving people without them actually doing the work of repair in your life. All right. We're going to chop it up on IG. So if you want to join us over there for the talk back part of our segment, the IG is at Daring Dialogues. I will see you there. Be well. If you don't come over, be well. And most importantly, be light.